Okay, hi guys. I just put this little thing together because I was actually looking for something like this online and I could not find it. So I thought, well, hey, I'll just make it. Now, obviously, there's lots and lots of information online about frames per second and what frame rates to work at in an animation, all that kind of thing. But I haven't really found any examples of people putting these things side by side and showing you exactly what's what, taking advantage of the YouTube's 60 frames per second, which it can do. It's been able to do that for maybe a year or a few months now. So I thought, yeah, I'd actually do a little animation. This is actually something I've done before, but I've just modified it for this. It's just a little running chap, little run cycle, quite fun, little long flowing beard and stuff. Um, and what I've done is basically I've done one version of it which runs on ones at 60 frames per second, which is above and beyond what the average animator would do. So that's we're running at 60 frames per second on ones, and that's 44 frames, 44 drawings, 44 individual drawings within this run cycle. And then we've halved that to have a 30 frames per second version, which is the middle one. Now that would be what I would lean towards personally. That would be how I would work, and that's what animators call on twos because you're doing one drawing every other frame. Now, generally, I work in PAL, which is 25 frames per second, but I still work it in twos. So it's that, but it's at 12.5 frames per second. Basically, is how it works out. And then I did one more version, which is on fours, which is one drawing every 4 frames, and that gives you your 15 frames per second playback. Now, I'm probably making this sound more confusing than it needs to be, but it's quite simple. So the one on the left, let's say that's a slightly economical way to animate in 2D. The one in the middle is twice the amount of work, so 22 frames, which doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine that extra amount of work over like a 3 minute or a 5 minute or even a half an hour film. It doubles the amount of work. And then the one to the right, that's 4 times the amount of work, 4 times the amount of actual individual drawings you have to do. Now, definitely, the one on the right looks smoother. It's a little bit more appealing. Now, remember, I've put a tiny amount of motion blur into this, just in the legs, because the legs move incredibly fast when he does the downward bounce. But apart from that, it's just 2D flat drawing, so there's no real motion blur. If it had motion blur added, the middle one would certainly look a lot smoother, and so would the one on the left. But my point is, most people don't tend to draw with motion blur. They tend to just draw flat illustrations, and then let the eye work out what's going on between one frame and the next. The persistence of vision and all that kind of stuff comes into play and allows you to observe something and, make it look like it's a moving object rather than a bunch of still drawings, which is what you're actually looking at. But yeah, so like I said, I was doing a bit of research into this, and I couldn't find any examples. So I just thought, hey, well, I'll make one and then share it because there's probably other people looking for examples of this as well. So yeah, I mean, in terms of what the studios do, I mean, obviously for CG computer animation, that's a totally different kettle of fish. What we're talking about here is 2D drawn animation. I would say there's no industry standard, and it certainly depends on the type of illustration, the type of animation. But you'll get big studios working on twos and even slower. Studio Ghibli, that generally, I believe that's all 24 frames per second, but they work on twos, so they're actually drawing 12 frames per second, basically, is the vast, vast, vast majority of Studio Ghibli stuff, which is beautiful, beautiful work. So it's not like it's a cop out to work in that way. And personally, for me, I tend to think in twos. Like there will be the occasion where I want to add an extra frame in, and there'll be other occasions where you can leave the same frame running for quite a while, and it just suits, it works because there's nothing happening. There's no point doing lots and lots and lots of additional frames. And there's pros and cons for each, but I like the punch and I like the on-off nature that you get on twos. That for me sits well, that suits my eye. Anyway, enough waffling. I just mainly wanted to share this and just sort of talk about it. I think it's quite interesting to see 3 different frame rates all running. I mean, obviously there's other frame rates you could have chosen. Like I said, if I was exporting this to 50p or 25p, you'd have less options to be able to share. But either way, I just thought I'd go for the maximum frame rate YouTube will allow, which is 60, and then divide that by 2, and then divide that by 2 again to give us our 15, our 30, and our 60 frames per second. Anyway, enough waffling. I hope that was useful, and yeah, feel free to put some questions down below. And yeah, peace out, guys.